Throwaway account, because my BIL knows my main. I and my husband have a 1-year-old son who has never had a haircut. My BIL is getting married in 4 months, and we're now caught in a ridiculous family drama over my son's hair. Yes, seriously. Some background. My son has curly hair that we've been letting grow out since birth, and we get compliments on it often. My husband was asked to be the best man in his brother's wedding, which initially we were both excited about despite some past tension with BIL. I should mention that I'm an early childhood educator, and one of my core parenting philosophies is respecting children's bodily autonomy whenever possible. This includes not cutting my son's hair until he's old enough to understand what a haircut is. I know some people think that's weird or whatever, but it's important to us, and it's just hair, for crying out loud. Yesterday, my BIL came over for coffee and said that his fiancée wants all men in the wedding party, including my 1-year-old son, to have matching short haircuts. I was immediately taken aback because 1, my son is a baby, not a prop for wedding aesthetics, and 2, we've been very clear about our choice to let him decide when he gets his first haircut. Mini update before I continue. I just got a text from my mother-in-law saying she thinks we should just do it to keep the peace, which makes me even more upset. She knows how important this is to us. So anyway, we explained our stance to BIL as calmly as possible. We offered alternatives like styling it neatly for the wedding or having our son wear a cute suit without being in the official wedding party. My husband was respectful about it and even suggested we could use some hair clips or something to make it look more formal if that was the concern. The moment we pushed back, BIL insisted it was just a haircut and accused me of being difficult and putting my weird parenting choices above his fiancée's wedding vision. Like, sorry for having principles about my child's body? I'm still seething as I type this. I suggested that maybe I could speak directly with his fiancée to understand her concerns better. BIL stood up abruptly and said, "No, absolutely not. You don't contact her directly." His tone was controlling in a way that gave me immediate red flags. I've worked with families with domestic issues before, and something felt off. My husband stepped in and calmly explained we weren't trying to cause problems, but that this was important to us as parents. Then he asked point blank if the fiancé actually cared about this, or if it was coming from BIL. BIL stammered before claiming his fiancé gets upset easily and that he handles difficult conversations for her while avoiding eye contact. Could he be any more obvious? BIL added, "Besides, I don't want my wedding photos ruined by having some kid with girl's hair in them." And there it was, the real issue. Not the fiancé's wedding vision, but his own toxic masculinity, or whatever you want to call it. I have other words for it, but trying to keep this civil. I pointed out that plenty of boys and men have long hair, including several celebrities we could name. I asked why this was suddenly an issue when he's seen our son dozens of times and never mentioned it before. Beal's voice rose as he said, "Look, I'm the groom. It's my wedding, and I'm asking for one simple thing. Why are you making this so complicated?" Just then, my son started crying, giving me an excuse to escape the conversation. When I came back after settling my son, my husband and BIL were standing in silence. BIL grabbed his keys and said, "Just think about it. I need an answer by next week." Then he left. After he was gone, my husband looked upset and revealed that his brother had threatened that if we didn't comply, he might need to reconsider having my husband as best man. My husband was hurt because being best man meant a lot to him. They were close growing up before BIL changed. There's also this whole complicated financial situation where my husband has been supporting his aging in-laws after BIL refused to contribute his fair share. Despite BIL making significantly more money than us, my husband pays about 80% of their parents' medical expenses. I'm not even exaggerating. This creates additional pressure to maintain family harmony, aka let BIL have his way all the time. I'm standing firm on this, but I know it's putting my husband in a terrible position between his brother, his parents, and me and our son. It's just hair, yes, but it's also about principles and not giving in to manipulation, which I suspect has been BIL's go-to tactic for years based on stories I've heard. I'm also genuinely concerned about his fiancée. The way he spoke about handling conversations for her and forbidding direct contact between us raised some serious red flags. I've seen controlling relationships in my line of work, and something feels off. I'm worried she might not even know about this haircut demand, or at least not care as much as he's making it seem. The whole "I handle difficult conversations for her" bit especially bothers me. She's an elementary school art teacher, and she seemed perfectly capable of speaking for herself. Is it normal to completely control communication like that? I think we all know the answer. My husband is torn because he promised his dying grandmother he would always look out for his brother, but this feels like enabling toxic behavior. We're also worried about what happens to his parents' care if we stand our ground and BIL retaliates by pulling his financial support, which honestly wouldn't surprise me at this point. I want to respect my son's bodily autonomy, support my husband, protect my in-laws' financial stability, and somehow not let BIL steamroll us all at the same time. I feel like I'm in an impossible situation over something as simple as a baby's haircut, which shouldn't even be anyone else's business. Thanks for reading this far if you made it. Any advice on how to handle this controlling brother-in-law without blowing up the entire family would be deeply appreciated. Now for the first update. Well, this absolutely blew up since I posted yesterday. Thank you all for your supportive comments and validation that I'm not crazy for wanting to protect my son's bodily autonomy. First off, so many of you called out the red flags with my BL's behavior toward his fiancée, and you were spot on. Things have escalated in ways I couldn't have predicted when I wrote my original post, and I'm still processing everything as I type this. After BIL left our house that day, my husband called his parents hoping they might offer some perspective, or maybe even mediate the situation. Big mistake. They were surprisingly evasive, saying they didn't want to get involved, but that sometimes small sacrifices keep the peace. My husband hung up feeling deflated. It was pretty clear they were implicitly siding with BIL. That night, my husband opened up about something he'd never fully explained before. When his grandmother was dying several years ago, he promised her he would always look out for his younger brother. This promise has made it difficult for him to address concerning behaviors over the years. He was torn between honoring that promise and standing up for our son. After thinking about it overnight, I decided to reach out directly to my BIL's fiancée, despite his warnings not to contact her. Many of you suggested this in the comments, saying I should bypass him entirely. I sent her a text saying I respected her wedding vision, but wanted to understand her concerns about our son's hair so we could find a solution that worked for everyone. Her response came almost immediately and confirmed what many of you suspected. She seemed confused, writing, "I have no problem with the baby's hair. I would never ask someone to cut their child's hair for a wedding. Who told you that?" I didn't even have time to respond before my husband's phone started ringing. It was Bill, absolutely fuming that I had contacted his fiancée behind his back. My husband put the call on speaker as Bill shouted that we had violated his boundaries and were trying to come between him and his future wife. According to him, she was now upset and crying because of me. When I calmly stated that I had the text messages showing his fiancé's confusion about the whole haircut demand, his tone changed dramatically. He started stammering that I had misunderstood his fiancée, that she was just being nice, and that I had put her in an awkward position by going around him. My husband finally asked the question we all know the answer to. Did your fiancé actually ask for our son's hair to be cut, or was that your idea? Instead of answering directly, BAL deflected with, "It doesn't matter whose idea it was, we're a unit now, and this is what we want for our wedding." I watched my husband's expression harden as he said, "I can't be your best man if you're going to lie to us and try to manipulate us like this." That's when BAL made a shocking statement. His voice became calm as he said, "Fine. I didn't want to do this, but Dad's medical bills are getting expensive. Would be a shame if you had to cover them all yourself." After hanging up, my husband sat in silence for several minutes. For those who asked about the financial situation in my original post, my husband covers about 80% of his parents' medical care expenses. His brother contributes the remaining 20%, which doesn't sound like much until you realize it's still about $1,500 monthly that we absolutely cannot afford to take on ourselves with a 1-year-old and my part-time work schedule. I spent that evening researching financial assistance programs for seniors while my husband struggled with this impossible choice between his parents' well-being and standing up to his brother's controlling behavior. We went to bed with no clear solution, both feeling sick about the whole situation. The next morning, I was feeding our son breakfast when my phone chimed with a text. It was from the fiancée. Her message was, "There are things you should know. Please don't tell him about this message." Edit for clarity. My husband and I discussed this text together, and he fully supported me meeting with her. We were both concerned for her safety at this point. I'm not going to lie, I was nervous about meeting her. Many commenters pointed out that Bael's behavior showed classic signs of being controlling and potentially emotionally abusive toward his fiancée. The way he spoke for her and prevented direct communication were major red flags. My husband and I had a long talk about everything. We agreed that regardless of the financial threats, we wouldn't let our son's bodily autonomy be compromised. As one commenter put it, "If you give in on this, you're teaching your BIL that threatening you works." I arranged to meet the fiancée at a coffee shop the next day while my husband stayed home with our son. My husband was worried about me going alone, but we figured it would be easier for her to talk openly without him there. Some of you asked about the in-laws' medical situation. My father-in-law had heart surgery last year and requires ongoing care, while my mother-in-law has severe rheumatoid arthritis that has worsened significantly in the past few years. They're both in their late 60s and their insurance covers only a portion of their treatments. My husband has been helping them financially since before we got married, and it's never been an issue until now. BIL makes nearly triple what my husband does, yet he's always found excuses to contribute the bare minimum. I want to address the comments suggesting we just cut our son's hair since it'll grow back. I understand that perspective, but one, this isn't just about hair anymore. It's about not rewarding manipulation and control. Two, my son's bodily autonomy matters even if he's too young to articulate that. And three, giving in would set a precedent for future demands from BIL. For those asking if we've considered a temporary restraining order or other legal protections, not yet, but we're documenting everything. My husband has started recording all calls with his brother. The financial threat is our biggest concern right now. We've looked into supplemental insurance options for my in-laws, but there's a waiting period that would leave a gap in coverage. My husband is considering taking on weekend work, though that would mean even less family time. To answer other frequent questions, 1. Yes, we've tried talking directly to the in-laws about BL's behavior before, but they tend to make excuses for him. 2. No, cutting contact completely isn't an option as long as we're helping with their care. 3. Yes, we've considered family therapy, but BIL has always refused. I know all of this drama over a baby's haircut seems ridiculous, but I think it's just the visible part of a much larger power struggle that's been brewing for years. I'll update again after meeting with the fiancée tomorrow. Based on her text, I'm worried about what she might reveal. My husband and I are trying to prepare ourselves for whatever information she shares while figuring out how to protect our family from BIL's financial threats. Thanks again for all your support and advice. It's helped us feel less crazy and more confident in standing our ground on this issue. I'll try to respond to more comments when I can, but there are just so many to get through. Now for the second update. Update 2. Hey Reddit, thanks for all the support on my previous posts. Original got locked for some reason, but whatever. I'm honestly still processing everything that's happened in the last few days, and it's been a wild ride since I got that text from my BIL's fiancé. I'm gonna pick up right where I left off with that cryptic text message from the fiancé. There are things you should know. Please don't tell him about this message. After discussing it with my husband, we agreed I should meet her. I suggested a coffee shop across town to minimize the chance of running into anyone we knew. When I arrived, she was already there in a corner booth. She kept checking her phone and looking toward the door. "Thank you for coming," she said. "I don't have much time. He thinks I'm at a teacher planning meeting." She explained that she's an elementary school art teacher, but what I didn't know was that BIL had been gradually limiting her contact with her coworkers and friends. Apparently, he speaks for her all the time without actually consulting her first. The haircut demand? Completely his idea. She'd never even thought about our son's hair until BIL mentioned it to her after our confrontation. He said he was protecting me from conflict, she explained. At first it seemed sweet, but now, over the next 20 minutes, BIL had been systematically isolating her from friends and family, checking her phone regularly, and dictating who she could talk to. She admitted she'd only recently recognized these behaviors as concerning after a student's mother confided in her about leaving an abusive relationship with similar patterns. "I used to be so independent," she said. "I don't know how I became this person who's afraid to speak her own mind." Our conversation was interrupted when her phone rang. "It's him," she quickly answered. She explained she was just shopping for some classroom supplies. I could hear his voice on the other end, though not the words. She kept nodding, even though he couldn't see her. "Yes, of course. I'll come right home," she said. "I know you need me there. I'm sorry. He says he needs me at home right now. He does this whenever I'm out alone for too long. Before rushing out, she explained that BIL had been making all kinds of unilateral wedding decisions, from the venue down to uninviting several of her close friends, while claiming these changes were mutual agreements. Each time she objected, he'd tell her she was being emotional or difficult until she gave in. As she stood to leave, she squeezed my hand and whispered, "Your son's hair is beautiful. Don't cut it." Then she asked me to delete any record of our meeting from my phone and hurried out. I sat there for a few minutes trying to process everything. I kept thinking about all the signs we'd missed over the years. Isn't it always so obvious in hindsight? I drove home feeling a mix of anger toward my BIL and concern for his fiancée. When I pulled into our driveway, I noticed an unfamiliar car parked out front along with my in-laws' sedan. My stomach dropped. I walked in to find my husband standing in our living room in what was clearly a discussion with his brother who had shown up unannounced and brought their parents along. My father-in-law was sitting on our couch. My mother-in-law sat beside him. Our son was thankfully still napping. BL said, "Oh good, we're all here now. I was just explaining to everyone how you two are threatening to ruin my wedding over your stubbornness." My husband, bless him, stood his ground. "This isn't about the haircut anymore. It's about your controlling behavior and dishonesty." Bill immediately interrupted. "So you're calling me a liar in front of our parents now?" Real mature. I started to explain my conversation with his fiancée, but Bill cut me off. "Oh, you mean your secret meeting? Yeah, she told me everything. She was really uncomfortable with all your invasive questions about our relationship. She only met you to be polite." My mother-in-law looked at me. "Why are you two creating all this drama over something as simple as a haircut? Your BIL's wedding should be the happiest day of his life." I opened my mouth to respond when my father-in-law suddenly clutched at his chest. Everyone froze. BIL immediately seized the opportunity. "See what you're doing? The stress you're causing could kill Dad. Is your son's hair worth that?" My husband helped his father to the bathroom while I retreated to check on our son, who had woken up from his nap. He was standing in his crib, watching me completely unaware of the drama unfolding in our living room. Those innocent eyes grounded me instantly. This was about protecting him from manipulation that would only get worse. The rest of the confrontation was brief. My husband helped his parents to their car, with BIL following behind, making comments about family loyalty and reasonable compromises. I stayed inside with our son, unable to trust myself not to completely lose it on BIL. After they left, my husband said, "This is getting out of hand." 10 minutes later, his phone pinged with a text from his brother. He showed it to me without a word. "Unless you agree to the haircut by tomorrow, not only are you out as best man, but I'm done contributing to Mom and Dad's medical expenses. Your choice, but we both know what Mom and Dad need more." That night was one of the longest. We spent hours researching emergency financial assistance programs for seniors. Thank you to those who sent resources in the comments. My husband called his brother twice, but the calls went straight to voicemail. We discussed taking out a loan, picking up extra shifts, selling our second car, anything to make up the shortfall if BIL actually followed through on his threat. Edit. To clarify, since some are asking in the comments, BIL contributes about $1,500 monthly to their parents' care. While this is only 20% of the total cost, it's still money we absolutely cannot make up with our current budget, especially with a 1-year-old and my part-time work schedule. The timing is especially cruel since my husband's company just announced a hiring freeze, eliminating the promotion he was counting on. Around 3 a.m., my husband finally broke the silence. "I keep thinking about what Grandma would want. She loved my brother, but she would be horrified by who he's become." I watched my husband fold the blanket. She wouldn't want me to enable this behavior, even to honor my promise to her. By morning, we'd made our decision. We wouldn't cut our son's hair, no matter the financial consequences. My husband called his parents to explain everything, including details from my conversation with the fiancé. They were hesitant to believe it at first. They've always favored BIL. But agreed to come over again later in the week to talk more. As I'm typing this, my husband is on the phone with a patient advocacy service to see if his parents qualify for additional assistance programs. Our son is playing with his blocks on the floor, occasionally reaching up, a habit he's had since he could grasp things. I don't know what's going to happen next. BIL has been blowing up my husband's phone all morning, alternating between guilt trips and outright threats. The fiancé hasn't responded to my text asking if she's okay. I'm worried for her safety, especially now that BIL knows we've talked. Thanks for reading all this drama. Sorry it's so long, but I needed to get it all out. Your support on my previous posts has meant everything during this nightmare. My husband and I are trying to stay strong, but honestly, we're scared about what BIL might do next. Has anyone dealt with family financial manipulation like this? Any advice for protecting both our son and the fiancé from this controlling behavior? Now for the final update. Final update on the whole baby hair wedding drama saga. It's finally over, guys. Looking back at my first post about my bail demanding we cut our son's hair for his wedding, I barely recognized the person who wrote it. Here's how everything finally played out. It's been about 3 weeks since my last update, where BIL had basically blackmailed us with his parents' medical expenses. That night, after his ultimatum text, my husband and I stayed up until dawn, researching financial assistance programs for seniors and crunching numbers to see if we could somehow cover the extra $1,500 per month. We both knew we couldn't bow to this kind of manipulation, but the reality of potentially harming his parents' healthcare access. By morning, we'd made our decision. My husband called his brother. I was honestly so proud of him, and calmly explained that we wouldn't be cutting our son's hair, period. He also expressed concern about his brother's controlling behavior toward his fiancée. The response was, not great. BIL just laughed and said, "You'll regret this," before hanging up. My husband looked after the call. He kept saying he'd failed his grandmother by not being able to fix his brother, which is ridiculous. You can't fix someone who doesn't want to change. We spent the next couple days. 3 days after that call, I was at the grocery store with my son when I literally ran carts with BIL's fiancée in the produce section. The first thing I noticed was her hair. When she saw me, she glanced around before wheeling her cart closer to mine. She told me that BIL had cut her hair himself after finding out about our coffee meeting. He'd said, "If you like making decisions without me, then I get to do the same." She showed me her phone with a text BIL had sent to my husband that she'd discovered while BIL was in the shower. "Maybe I'll give your precious nephew a haircut myself next time you leave him with mom and dad. Who threatens to forcibly cut a baby's hair as revenge?" We sometimes left our son with my in-laws on weekends, which meant BIL could potentially have access to him. I processed what she was telling me. She twisted her engagement ring and told me she'd decided to call off the wedding, but was terrified of BIL's reaction. She had no family nearby, and he'd systematically cut her off from most of her friends over the past 3 years. She was a teacher with limited savings and was worried about where she would go. Before we parted, she handed me a USB drive. She explained she'd been recording BIL's outbursts and threats for months, apparently a suggestion from that student's mother, who'd escaped her own abusive relationship. She'd originally planned to use these recordings to give herself courage to leave, but thought they might help our family too. When I got home, my husband was on the phone with his mom. She was crying because BIL had just informed them he was cutting off all financial support for their medical bills, effective immediately. He claimed we had forced his hand with our disrespect, classic abuser tactic. Blame others for your awful choices. I waited until he finished the call before showing him the USB drive. We plugged it in and listened to the first recording, a conversation between BIL and someone else, possibly a friend, where he explicitly discussed using his parents' medical needs as leverage to control my husband. "They'll do whatever I want as long as mom and dad need the money." My husband went still as he listened. I've never seen that expression on his face before, something between heartbreak and fury. There were dozens of recordings, each worse than the last. Some showed how he manipulated his fiancée. Others revealed plans to control various family members. The next day, my husband invited his parents over. They were reluctant at first, convinced we were the problem in this situation. My husband explained that we had something they needed to hear, and they agreed to listen. We carefully selected a few recordings that revealed BIL's manipulation tactics, specifically ones where he discussed using their medical expenses as a control mechanism. "Mom's heart condition is actually perfect timing," he said in one recording. "Now I've got leverage for years." I watched my father-in-law's face as he listened. The transformation was something I'll never forget. Confusion, then disbelief, then this devastating realization, and finally, quiet rage. My mother-in-law just sat there, occasionally shaking her head. When the last recording ended, my father-in-law stood up, which took effort with his recent surgery, and asked to use our phone. My mother-in-law put a hand on his arm and said, "Let me." She called BIL right there, putting it on speaker as she informed him that she had heard everything and never wanted to see him again unless he sought professional help. BIL tried to deny it all, claimed the recordings were manipulated, that we were turning them against him. His mother simply said, "I recognized your voice and I recognized your heart. Both are broken in ways I failed to see," before hanging up. That night, my husband's aunt called. Word had spread quickly through the family, and several relatives had arranged to cover the parents' medical costs that BIL had been paying. His leverage was gone. 2 days later, there was a knock at our door. It was the fiancée with 2 suitcases. She'd finally left BIL and needed a place to stay until she could make arrangements with a cousin in another state. We set her up in our spare room, and honestly, watching her slowly relax over the next few days. Meanwhile, BIL was spiraling. He called everyone we knew, alternating between rage and tearful pleas for forgiveness. He showed up at his parents' house twice, only to find they'd changed the locks. He even tried to get into our backyard at one point. But our neighbor, bless him, saw him hopping the fence and called the police. The fiancée got a restraining order after BIL bombarded her with hundreds of texts ranging from, "I'll kill myself if you don't come back," to, "You've ruined my life, I'll ruin yours." She's staying with us until her cousin can drive down next week to take her to safety. Last night, we had dinner with my in-laws. My son was sitting on his grandfather's lap, twirling his curls, when my father-in-law looked up with tears in his eyes. "I'm so sorry we didn't see what was happening," he said. "Thank you for standing your ground." My mother-in-law has been researching counseling resources for the whole family. There's a lot of guilt there. They clearly feel they missed signs of BIL's controlling behavior for years, but also determination to build healthier relationships going forward. I'll try to respond to comments, but honestly, I'm emotionally drained from these past few weeks and just trying to focus on supporting my husband who's grieving the brother he thought he knew. This chapter of my life with my controlling brother-in-law is finally closed. Thanks to everyone who helped me through this, especially those who encouraged me to trust my intuition about his behavior all along. Edit. Wow, this blew up overnight. To address some common questions. Yes, we've installed security cameras around our house, first purchase after everything went down. The fiancée is doing better each day. She's already talking about writing about her experience to help others recognize the early warning signs of controlling relationships. My husband has started therapy to work through his complicated feelings about his brother and the promise to his grandmother. Turns out, looking out for someone doesn't mean enabling their toxic behavior. And our son's hair remains uncut. We're thinking of donating it to charity when he decides he's ready for a haircut, probably in a couple years.